Javelins, freelancers, ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to a special report from ANTHEM Universe. I am but one of your hosts, Ogaz, and tonight I just want to talk about something fresh. We've got a tweet from Mark Darrah, of course the executive producer on ANTHEM, and Mark has actually answered a question that seemingly was actually quite a simple question, a question that we've seen before. But what was surprising was the answer from Mark. Now, of course, the question itself was from @JasonLiney, and it mentions, as you see, do you have to do a mission to unlock your Javelin? For example, after the tutorial, can I instantly play as my thick boy Colossus? Now, again, this is seemingly a pretty straightforward question. Mark has certainly answered these previously. This time, however, there's something different. And as you can see, we originally were going to have Javelins tied to missions, but this resulted in them getting unlocked too late. As a result, you'll instead be able to choose a suit to unlock at different level thresholds. Now, this is important. This is not a earth-shattering, game-breaking change, but it is a significant pivot in terms of the conversations that have been going on up to this point. And what I mean by that is I was reflecting on the type of shift that this is, and I was considering perhaps there's been some internal playtesting that's resulted in maybe this slight adjustment. I suspect player behavior and choice are probably likely motivators here. And so then started to really think about, well, why would that be? Like, this is an interesting point. We started to think that perhaps that suggests that the devs, perhaps as they were playing through it, perhaps they were ranking up, perhaps they were playing it without concern for a certain story arc or element. You know, a story arc that was motivated by unlocking a certain Javelin. And then perhaps some of them just weren't motivated to actually unlock that Javelin. So the reward by placing a Javelin behind a certain story arc may not have been a driving motivator for some players. So it does beckon the question whether that's what was going on or whether there are other sides of the story. I guess from a benefit point of view, this is important because it diversifies the journey for the players ahead. It gives players a sense of control. It means that when you level up, you then have a full choice over which Javelin you select. Now, it is important that initially that wasn't confirmed, but there was actually a second tweet which came out only shortly after in response to another question. And as you can see there, Mark has clearly mentioned you can choose at each level gate, except you will start with the Ranger. So the Ranger will continue to be your first starting point. However, there will be gated level ranks, and whatever that looks like, level 10, level 15, level 25, we don't know. I suspect it would be sooner than later. I don't think we want to be gating Javelins behind, level 40 or something high, if there is a level 40 or a level 30. We'd probably rather get to them sooner than later. We'll definitely get to see at this point the Ranger be your starting. And then as you progress, making that gradual shift, and you'll be able to select at that point where you will go from there. Now, I thought it'd be pertinent to explore some points in our Discord, of course, over at discord.anthemuniverse.com. A couple of the guys, Slakula and Njex, actually raised some good points in conversation, and I thought I'd give them a shout out because they actually made me start to think a lot about some of these elements. But Slakula made a good point, and he makes reference here that Mark Darrah mentioned some time ago, and I do recall this, and it was the belief that people have a tendency to stick with whatever they start with the game. And there is this sense, there's a reality, in biology they call the term homeostasis, but the conversation for human behavior is the tendency to want to go to the norm, a desire to norm. And we do it all the time. We do it at work. When we go to meetings, we sit down in the same chair. And when someone's in that chair, when we go to the next meeting, we get uncomfortable. We actually get a little bit frustrated. We feel disconnected, and we want to sit in that chair. It's a silly example, but it's a good example how people are motivated and their habits motivate those, behaviors. So I would agree. I think, Slakula, you've raised a good point. There is a tendency for people to want to engage with that, and there's a reluctance perhaps to try new things. Perhaps this is a way to ensure that people are easily and I guess very clearly able to adapt and grab onto the next Javelin of choice. Now, Sakula also mentioned something interesting here, and he said this leads to a few questions. Firstly, why is it so important to obtain all of the javelins? Now, that's a good point. I guess the reality is that there's certainly an incentive for you to be able to access those and share in the world. I think BioWare ideally would like to see, of course, everyone acquire all the javelins so they'll be able to experience different levels of the game. There may also be a financial conversation there as well. I mean, let's face it, we will be looking at some of those cosmetic items, and the more you unlock, the more potential, I guess, cosmetic items you may be purchasing. So that's probably a cynical viewpoint, but certainly something to think about. It certainly is a revenue stream for the game. And of course, how can I forget our good friend Angex over in our Discord, as I said, at discord.anthemuniverse.com. He mentions, I fully believe the reason why Mark stated they went to a level gate is to, of course, to unlock those suits. It's like why I kind of supported Engrams. It forces you to go back to Tarsus to interact there instead of staying out in the world for 10 levels. Thus, it makes you interact with your level and then your actual content much sooner, and therefore drives you back to the main story. So I do like that. I guess the philosophy behind this drive, as I mentioned, is to get people to actually drive them back to whether it's Tarsus, wherever it is, in order to achieve and choose your Javelin as you rank up, as opposed to it being sort of gated behind a story that you have to go out to explore. It's quite clear that in playtesting, at least, there's something there that means that people weren't actually going out of their way. Perhaps they were getting to a certain point in the story, and then they realized quickly they didn't have the necessary Javelin, or they didn't actually have Javelins at a certain point that they might be needing. And perhaps they got to a point where they realized it was time to maybe reflect and maybe make some adjustments so that people can actually be prompted and then to choose that Javelin. The criticisms behind that online are about story, and I can understand that. There's some people saying that, well, without that, then don't you then lose the magic of unlocking a Javelin with story? And I think it's a fair point, but it doesn't mean they can't still do it. They could still gate this behind a level select choice, but then have you go out on that journey that would engage in the relevant acquisition of that Javelin. Of course, the other thing is they could very easily just embed that within the lore of the game, within codex and other areas. It's not clear what extent we will see of story from each individual Javelin. For example, we do know that the Javelins are all tied back or linked into different factions in the game in some way, and that's through observable symbols that have been witnessed and observed in the game so far. So it's quite clear that that's going to happen, but we don't know the extent of how large that story will be, and it may not be something like a full-on journey that we're expecting. But let's see. Now, I'm going to give BioWare the benefit of the doubt of this one. We want to be able to see where this is going to go, how this will take it. I think it's a good decision. I don't think it's something to be frustrated or concerned about, but it is an interesting choice and quite clearly engaged by motivations of players and play testing. Anyway, that was just a quick, grab of, what's happening today in the world of Twitter. As I said, if you are interested in engaging with the community, please check out discord.anthemuniverse.com. You can follow us on Twitter, which is at ANTHEMuniverse. And of course, Javelins, freelancers, we will see you next over the wall.